All right, so let's pretend we've jumped forward. We know what our animation, we either have it finished or we have the first pass, the first block out, and first or second, and we're getting where all our camera angles are supposed to be, right? So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to select the characters and I'm going to turn off the controls so that I can just see the character. So I'm turning off face sliders, on face controls, and body controls. Okay, we've got those. Now, if I was really ready to do it, I might even boost up the smooth level a little bit to make the characters look nicer, but I'm not going to worry about that right now because it kind of it makes it chug a bit. So if I go to my perspective camera, and we just see what's happening. So, from a movie called Ruthless People, which is ridiculously hilarious, stars Danny DeVito, being his Danny DeVito evil movie persona self. So there's a lot of ways I could play this, right? I could just have an over the shot. Typically, you rarely want a shot that it's just like this. It's not the most exciting shot, right? So I could do this a few different ways. I could have it as an over the shot sort of hit. I could also have it that it cuts, and then it cuts over to here. Then it cuts back. Or I could also have a pan where it's slowly kind of going across as it's talking. So there's cuts, and then there's pans. What you don't want to do is have you guys heard of the 180 rule?
Yes.
What's the 180 rule?
You never go past 180 degrees in a shot.
Yeah, which basically means I don't want it to be 100% here, and then 100% there, and then 100% here, and just cutting back and forth, because it's not natural. It's a very uncomfortable way of filming when you see that, right? So you want to plan your shots, and you notice I'm not really animating. I'm not worried about their legs that much. I still want their bodies and their torso and their buttocks to be where it should be when they're moving back and forth. But my shots are waist up. So that's what I'm worried about the most. That's what I'm going to shoot. Okay. So I'm going to show you the technique of doing cuts and also pans. But right now you should just start to think about what is going to, framing your shots like this. Back over here. Those are those are decent shots. You could occasionally have, every once in a while, a little bit of this shot, but I wouldn't carry the entire, in most cases, I wouldn't carry the entire scene from this one side shot. It kind of reminds me, even though they had this shot, plus they clipped back and forth, if you remember When Harry Met Sally, and they're in the restaurant, famous scene where she embarrasses the heck out of him. But basically, you still want to have it that you'll have over the shot, over the shot, over the shoulder, over the shoulder. So how do I set those up, right? So first, I want to make sure I'm in my perspective graph editor. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. Now, I don't want to key my perspective camera. I like to leave that one by itself so it's not going to get messed up, because later on, if I'm still animating or have to tweak things, I don't want to have to keep on, every time I scrub, it's going to reset to where it's keyed. So this one we don't key. We make a new camera. Okay? So if I go to Panels, Perspective, New. So I'm going to Panels, Perspective, New, and I'm making a new perspective camera. And now you'll notice I'm in that camera, and it says Persp 3 at the bottom. And I could even change its name either in the channel box or the attribute editor. Just select its name up top here. I'm in my channel box. And I'll call this one Movie Cam. Okay. And press Enter. So I created it, I renamed it. So everybody with me so far? It's cool. So I created a new camera. I have that camera selected. If I accidentally click away from it and go, oops, there's nothing selected, how do I get that camera back? I'm looking through the movie camera, which I can either choose by going through Panels, Perspective, and you see there's Movie Cam. And then choosing that first little movie icon all the way on the top left, and then that selects the camera I'm looking through. Okay, so the first little icon. One other thing I'm going to do is now's a good time to set the resolution that I plan to render out at. So if I go to my render settings, and make sure I'm at HD 720. And here's the other thing that's really important. If I were doing an image sequence, you don't have to do it right now, but the renderable camera, I changed that to Movie Cam. So I'm in my render settings. I clicked on my render settings. Remember, it's that little clipboard that has a gear on the bottom right. I change my image size to HD 720, which is 1280 by 720. And I make my renderable camera Movie Cam, because if I do decide to render it out that it's going to be an image sequence or just spit out a movie, then that's what I want to use. Okay. Everything else is cool. We're good. And now that I know that's set, I can actually turn on, if I want to see the framing of the shot, I can turn on this little thing called Resolution Gate. And the Resolution Gate, it's this little icon right under the renderer icon. It's the first one that looks like a little square with a blue circle in the middle. And it boxes it out like this. And what that does is that shows me when I render it at 1280 by 720 where my shot is going to be, what's going to render. So I want to fit things into this shot. You see that? Just like that. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to scrub to the very beginning. And with the camera selected, I want to start here. And I press S to set the key for the camera. You'll notice now my keys are set. This is where the first shot is. Okay. And on this one, let's say for me on frame 80 is where she starts talking. So that's where I'm going to clip and go to a shot of her. So I move to frame 80 when I want the next cut to be. And then I go so I could see her and maybe frame him with his little posture of how he's holding his hand there. And I press S. Now, here's the weird thing, though. Look what it does. It's panning. So that's not what I want, is it? But before I fix that, so maybe right at this point I want to cut back to him on frame 167. Here's a little trick. Let me show you. I go back to frame 0, which is where this camera shot is, and I middle mouse drag in the timeline to 167. And what that does is it allows you to scrub through the timeline without advancing the animation. Okay? So in essence, it keeps the camera exactly where it is, so I can press S again and cuts back. It'll go back to that first position. I don't have to try and frame it back. I want them to be exact. If every time I cut, it's a little bit off, that's a little weird. It's a little disorientating, and we're not used to it. So if I play this in where are you? Stepped preview. Now, the characters are going to look weird when I do this, but let's just see what happens with the camera shot. See how that works? So ignoring them, but the cut shot worked. I'm going to turn that off now. Because if I play it, look, it's all over the place. And that is because if we go into the curves, we can see it's doing all this stuff, right? We want it to be instantaneous. One frame, it's over here. The very next frame, it's way over here. Right now, it's transitioning. So I take all my curves with the camera selected. I select all these curves. I can zoom out a little bit to make sure I get all of them. And I go and click on the step tangents. It looks literally like little stairs. Do you see a little icon right here? It looks like stairs. It's like it goes to the right, up, and then to the right again. And when I click on that, it steps these so they're instantaneous. So now watch what happens when I play it. So that's how we do a cut. You set the keys at what frame when something is going to happen. So at frame 0, it's here. The next frame, or next keyframe, or next shot is at this point, frame 80. And then the next shot is 167 where it goes back. Okay. Then I go into the graph editor. I select all those curves. And then I make it stepped. And if I put my cursor over these, and I'm wondering, which I know it's hard to see on the projector, but when I choose this, if I put my cursor over any of these, you'll see it says step tangents. So that's how you know. Whenever you put your cursor and you're like, what is that? Put your cursor over it, and then you'll see in the help line what it says. And then that's how you know. So, alrighty then. So we've got this down. And that's looking good. Now suppose right about here we wanted to start it slowly panning to a different shot, right? So let's say like I set a key where I want it to be locked. In other words, from frame 168 in my case to 320, I don't want it to move. So that means I put at 320, I set another key. And then I have to start like, okay. So let's say it's right about there. So let me get rid of that one. I want to do something different. Delete. Now this is what we can also do. I can actually look at it and decide what my focus is for the camera. Or I could just go in and say, okay, he's here. I've got this. And if I just oh, come on, killing me here. Oh, there we are. Just not wanting to respond, are you? There it is. Oh, that's right. They changed that. Okay. So what's happening is this guy is set up based off of what its focus is. So like, in other words, if I'd made this the focus, press F, and then just kind of snap back into it, then when I actually rotate, oh, not you, yeah, you can see how I can rotate a little bit and see how these are. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to manually do it. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to say I want it to be right about here by then. I'll fix the bumpiness of it later. So I set a key there. I don't like that. Let's say by here, it's right about there. I'm just showing you how to do a pan so you know how. Okay, so I basically set another key. So now it'd be a better shot if it actually lifted up a little bit so we could see it. But you get the idea. So I can set the keys. If I want to adjust it, that's all going into the curves and isolating which ones are being affected the most. Pressing F to zoom in. So this is going to be weird, but just so you can kind of see. But you can see how I can start to tweak those out. Then I could go in just like with the ball and then start making these. Oh, I don't want that linear. I want it spline if that's what I wanted. And then I can have that ease in and ease out. So I could do that if I don't like it. Or I could do a pan. Let me delete these. So let's see what that looks like. So I could pan inward as well to get that effect. Just like if I wanted it, like somebody was talking about, like, oh, panning away from the character, you can do that. You would just set up the shot. I'm not using multiple cameras. I'm just putting them all on the same one. If this was a bigger production and we were doing a lot of different types of rendering, I would probably use different cameras. But for the sake of ease and consistency and saving time at the end when we're putting all this stuff together, one camera and just making it do the things we want it to do, but not the perspective camera. Okay? So when you're going in, just remember, once again, stepped for when you want the cuts, and then linear or curves when you want it to actually do a pan. And then I can edit the properties of that to make it go faster, slower, different things like that. Make sense? Questions? And